Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to Migrating to the Cloud, Best Practices presented by Neovera. Our presenter for today is Dana Lees. She is an IT leader with over 20 years of experience successfully delivering industry-leading enterprise-wide solutions. At Neovera, Dana is the Director of Technology Implementation Services, and she works daily with clients to incorporate the cloud into their core business model, helping them select, migrate, secure, and maintain their multi-cloud infrastructures, platforms, software, databases, and desktops. She also leads up the Azure migration practices, which include data hosting and migrations, along with compliance as a service offerings. Now, these offerings also include SOC 2, CMMC, and FedRAMP. And Neovera helps with that by being an Azure GovCloud service provider. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We're going to go over what this webinar is about. So today we're going to introduce best practices for cloud migrations. These are components of a successful cloud migration, which are the do's. We'll talk about the pitfalls to avoid when migrating to the cloud, which are the don'ts. And then at the end, we'll have a synopsis of a migration checklist. Now, this webinar is intended for those who are just beginning their journey to the cloud. So the housekeeping items are you can post questions in the question pane anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll try to answer all your questions at the end of the webinar itself. We will also be sending the link of the recording and the checklist. But before I hand this over to Dana Lees, we would like to ask you a couple of questions. Okay, thank you very much for your time in answering those few questions. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Dana Lees, who will talk about the do's and don'ts.
Thank you, Shar. I'm hearing a little echo. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, just making sure. All right. So as you begin your journey to the cloud, there are multiple cloud deployment models. Most of you should all be familiar with the on-prem model where your software and technology are often located in your company's own data center, but it may be in a data center like Equinix. Before you start considering some of these other models, one of the things you want to do is apply the 5 R's of rationalization for when you're going to select a particular model. Those rationalizations are whether you're going to rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, or replace. And I'll provide some examples as we walk through these deployment models. So infrastructure as a service, which is IaaS, gives you the basic building blocks for compute, storage, and other networking capabilities. This past year, a very popular IaaS selection for organizations around the world has been Windows Virtual Desktop, as workforces went remote due to the pandemic. When you select a model such as Windows Virtual Desktop, this is a rehost decision. So you want to rehost how your employees do their day-to-day work, as opposed to in the office. The platform as a service in the lower right, that is where you get development tools, database management, and business analytics out of the box. When you're looking at the PaaS model, you'll be considering rebuilding. You might want to rebuild in order to take advantage of Azure App Service. Azure App Service is a fully managed web hosting service for building web apps, mobile backends, and RESTful APIs. At this point, you might actually even consider re-architecting so you can leverage SQL database. Azure SQL database includes serverless compute, hyperscale storage, and more seamless DBA management support. The other model that you want to consider is software as a service. That's where you just connect to a cloud-based application over the internet, and you make sure it's integrated with your other solutions, other deployment models. A big one here, I'm sure everyone is familiar with, is Microsoft 365. It was recently renamed from Office 365. But there are so many other software products out there. You'll want to look at the ones that you're currently hosting on-prem. And when you're looking at those and evaluating what you have on-prem, this would be your replace option. But there are many cloud options out there for finance and accounting, sales and marketing systems, HR systems. There's customer support systems like Atlassian and Zendesk. There's products like Adobe Creative Cloud. There's even Citrix Cloud. So there are hundreds now of software as a service providers that make your day-to-day management of those systems much easier. In the middle here, we have the hybrid approach as a deployment model. An example where you may want to leverage this approach is your applications are cloud ready and you want to move those to the cloud, but you're still working through your data tier. You may have a hybrid where your application tier is sitting in the cloud, but your data tier is still remaining on-prem because you're still working on a re-architect solution. There's also your multi-cloud options where you may have some software as a service, some hybrid, some PaaS, some IaaS. you will be thinking about what are the right solutions for your company and when in the right time it is to adopt it. A good example of a future state multi-cloud model might be where you have all your applications hosted in Azure because you're taking advantage of the app services, but you really love your Oracle databases, so all your databases are housed over in Oracle Cloud. So connect the two together and magic happens. You want to keep in mind, though, that not everything should go into the cloud, and moving to the cloud is more than just flipping a switch. So don't forget about your on-premise infrastructure that needs to be integrated with the cloud. It is important to ensure that you're doing the right assessments there so that systems are properly functioning for your organization. And do think about modernizing your environment by going beyond infrastructure as a service approach and leveraging either a PaaS or a SaaS solution. This is important to point out because it's not always clear where the cloud provider's responsibilities end and where the customer's responsibilities begin across the different service models. So this graphic demonstrates for on-prem versus IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS solutions what the responsibilities are between the two parties. It's important to note that for all service types, data, endpoints, accounts, and access management is always retained by the customer. Azure does make it easier, though. You can leverage their security capabilities, and they give you considerable insight into compliance management if you properly implement their tools. So let's see, we don't want to ignore any governance, compliance, and security requirements. And we do want to explore all the connectivity options as it relates to tying all these services together. There's point to site to site, express route options. One thing to bear in mind as well is that enforcing compliance and security standards is not an out-of-the-box experience, though. All right, so then how do we ensure success? First thing you want to do is make sure you understand your motivations. Why are you moving to the cloud? Perhaps your data center contract is expiring, or you have a whole bunch of on-prem end of support technology that's critical to your business function. Maybe you've been asked to build new technical capabilities that you don't have in-house today. There's new compliance requirements that you need to align to. The one thing key here, though, is you should not adopt the cloud without establishing goals and KPIs to measure your success. You need to align the business, the people, and technology strategy around your motivators to achieve your business goals. If there is any inadequate or misaligned motivations, you could be facing a lot of organizational resistance. One of the motivators may be cost savings. People always talk about, oh, the cloud's cheaper, but this is not always the case. If you don't have, you'll see across the bottom here, a proper cloud and data governance framework. Having the right framework will help you rationalize which workloads or applications should be slated for cloud adoption, and you'll be able to measure the cost associated with migrating that workload. So here we don't want to underestimate the pricing factors, such as regions and resource types that can become very expensive. And you do need to begin with a foundational understanding of your existing enterprise architecture. This should be familiar with many folks. They're just your planning phases. But one factor that will overwhelmingly determine your migration success or failure is your process of discovery, assessment, and planning. You should spend the majority of your time in the discovery phase rather than the actual migration itself. It could be as much as 70% of the time for the overall effort. We'll talk a bit more on discovery, but some of the other things to note here: pre-migration, this is where you're going to document everything that you plan to do as part of the migration. You're defining all of your environment setup and configurations. And then once you have everything discovered, defined, requirements all set, you'll move into the migration phase. And this is all about what are the workloads, which ones are tightly coupled together and need to move together, how they're dependent upon each other, etc. And lastly, you'll have your post-migration where you're going to stabilize and get all of the reporting, monitoring bells and whistles. You'll start doing your compliance reporting and you'll tune your security services. So what you don't want to forget or think the cloud is just a bunch of VMs and storage with massive compute and horsepower. It's much more than that. And you do want to break that macro architecture apart so that the micro architectures can be targeted for the appropriate service solutions. So architectural decisions should be made after all your assessments are completed. The architectural options themselves should not be limited. And one of the major benefits of the cloud is freedom of choice. And yes, so the discovery phase, very important. Most organizations rely on multiple workloads to deliver vital business functions. Examples include COTS workloads and mission critical workloads. When we talk about workloads, the smallest unit of technical function that supports a workload is called an asset. The workload itself is a collection of assets, so your infrastructure, applications, and data. These items support the execution of any common business process. Together, they become what is called a workload. In addition and that's you're going to start there in the discovery phase. And next, you're going to plan out using infrastructure maps. What are the dependencies between these workloads? And don't forget to include connections that are external, because that's definitely part of the successful go live. If you forgot about it, then things aren't gonna function very well. But that's the point of the infrastructure maps. And then you'll visualize those and start grouping them together so that you can prioritize how and when they migrate. And you will assign readiness metrics. You'll say this one's ready because it's just going to be the lift and shift, which is just the rehost model. Some of them will be tagged with a rehost. A re-architecture. Some of them won't migrate at all because you'll just adopt a software as a service solution. So those are the types of activities you're going to look every workload. What are the right deployment options for each of these workloads? Once you kind of get all that pulled together and you have an idea where you're heading, you want to start to prepare for how you're going to address your security requirements and those types of things as well, so you can make the proper decisions. As far as cost estimating, there are several tools that can help you estimate your monthly workload costs. There's the Azure pricing calculator, and there's another tool called Azure Migrate. These collectively really help to start giving you what is the cloud going to cost me once I get there. And so you need to do that to try to understand if it is the right answer for that workload. Lastly, the whole collaboration area, the bottom line is you want to minimize disruption to your business. So you need to make sure that you develop and build an organizational readiness plan. Roles are likely going to change along with daily work. So this is a very important aspect. How am I going to support this now that I'm there? How is the organization going to interact with a cloud model? So one thing you don't want to overlook storage solutions for both the IaaS and PaaS delivery models. There are so many options. There are ones where if you need the super high speed premium storage, they have that. If you have information that you need to migrate, but you hardly ever use, there are cold storage options that can be very, very inexpensive. But really, the plethora of options, there are a lot. So this is going to help you with your costing. You do really need to know what your workload and your usage patterns are and design for resiliency and availability. They are not offered by default when it comes to cloud services. So a very important aspect when you're doing your discovery. All right, so those are your basic do's and don'ts, and I've emphasized the importance of discovery. So what's the migration going to look like once you've followed the high-level guidance and best practices offered here? As Shar mentioned earlier, you'll all be receiving the detailed information checklist here that you can barely read, that I put it on the slide, but what you're doing in the requirements definition phase is really, you're going to focus on organizing your resource. This is where this whole phase is, you're going to document all of your details of your Azure Cloud platform. You'll want to isolate resources from other parts of the organization as part of your initial requirements. You're going to be looking at what are all the policies assignments that you want to do as part of your governance. The Azure RBAC is critical. Getting that right from the start, it really helps you with your roles-based access control. You'll apply all of your guardrails that were established in discovery as it relates to security and compliance. For operational monitoring and the security automation and those activities, this is your org readiness assessment that you did in discovery. It's the how-to. What are you going to do now that how are you going to do it, right? Let's see. There are some so there's some other governance constructs that you're going to be looking at, but that's really going to evolve as you're actually doing the actual work here. All right, so setup and configuration. This is really about you're doing the foundational environment so that you can prepare the environment to migrate your workloads. You're going to create all the hierarchies that you defined in the previous phase. You're going to create blueprints and actually create the policies that you've defined. You're going to do your network setup and configuration. You're going to start granting access to all the resource groups, your subscriptions. You'll start doing your Active Directory setup, all of the initial setup for that as well. RBAC will be staged here and ready to allocate. Lots of clickety click at this point in time. So it's following all the things that you defined and getting it all set up in the Azure world. The checklist that we're sharing with everyone today is really about an example lift and shift, which is your rehost option. Some organizations may already be on Microsoft 365 and have an AD tenant ready to go. What you would do with Azure itself is trust that and bring that into your Azure environment. But some individuals may still have an on-prem version of Active Directory that needs to be migrated. So I'm marking that activity as optional because it's certainly a big portion of the migration effort if you need to perform an actual AD migration. So I just wanted to call that out. As it relates to your application and data migrations, that's really the workloads we've been talking about. And what's going to happen here is for each of the workloads that you've ranked and it has a readiness score, the ones with the highest score, you'll be able to get those rolling and really take off with all of your rehost items. As far as doing that work, there are tools called Azure Site Recovery, and you'll be at the workload level setting up the connectivity. There are a few more items that you need to take care of before you can make sure user testing can be performed to make sure that they're ready to go. And then once you've made that go decision, you can go live. Once you've put a workload into the Azure environment and it's running, you need to ensure that all your monitors, your licenses, your antivirus, your backups and replication, very fast follower to the go live within hours and days is the best answer. But that's kind of how you get to, I'm in Azure now, yay, I'm in the cloud. There is the post-migration, and there's lots of things you'll be doing as part of managed services, keeping the environment compliant, et cetera, and so forth. But really, that's not part of the migration activities. So that is all kind of some tips there is in the checklist, but really not for the do's and don'ts today. So it's kind of bringing us to the end here with questions.
And I didn't see any questions posted. Oh, I do apologize. When you can also set up servers. One of the questions.
Certainly, you can set up servers. What kind of server, Lee?
Dana, I answered him on the chat window.
Huh?
I answered him on the chat window, but we'll follow up with him as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Nestor.
I still want to know what kind of server, so.
Okay, I do not see any other questions listed here. So, guess everyone feels pretty comfortable with all the discussion today. All right. Well, definitely, I mean, the one question that we have for Lee, we can also follow up separately as well. As I stated, we will send out a link for the recording and for the checklist that Dana went over today. But if you do happen to have any other questions, please contact NeoVera. We'll be more than happy to discuss your needs, your questions, your wants, and just go over a few different things with you, a few different options for your Azure migration or for your Azure thinking of migration. So Dana, anything else for today then?
No, I think there'll be that follow-up email with links to the materials and all that stuff. So and I'm sure is the email address to learn more info at neovera.com. Just want to mention that. But I thank everyone for joining.
All right, thank you very much today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll send out the information shortly.
Bye, everyone.